It's January 29th, 2001. A mother walks into her daughter's apartment after a day of unanswered calls. What she discovers will haunt the Syracuse Police Department for the next 2 decades and counting. Her 18-year-old daughter, Jill Lynn Uto, lies motionless on her futon, multiple stab wounds covering her body, killed by her own kitchen knife. This is the story of a case so cold, it became one of the largest case files in Syracuse police history. A case where the killer walked among us for 24 years, never caught, never identified, never brought to justice. I'm about to take you through every twist, every dead end, and every heartbreak of a family that lost everything on what should have been America's biggest party night. But first, let me paint you the picture of who Jill Lynn Uto really was. Born March 20th, 1982, in Houston, Texas, Jill Lynn was the embodiment of fierce independence. At just 18, she had already dropped out of high school in 9th grade, not because she was giving up, but because she was hungry for life. She immediately earned her GED and threw herself into the working world with a determination that impressed everyone around her. Standing 5 feet 4 inches tall, weighing 115 pounds, with blonde hair and a smile that could light up a room, Jill Lynn was working 2 retail jobs while studying to become a paramedic. She had dreams, she had ambitions, and she had recently moved out of her mother's house on Butternut Street to prove she could make it on her own. Her apartment was on the 6th floor of 600 James Street, in Syracuse's near northeast neighborhood. A secure building, mind you, not the kind of place where random violence typically occurs. Jill Lynn lived with her mother, Joanne Browning, and her sister, Jenna. The family had moved around quite a bit, spending 5 years in Colorado Springs before settling in New York State in 1997. Her father was absent from her life, making the bond between Jill Lynn, her mother, and her sister even stronger. Now, here's where the story takes its tragic turn. January 28th, 2001, Super Bowl Sunday. The Baltimore Ravens were facing off against the New York Giants in Tampa, Florida. Across America, families were gathering around television sets, preparing for an evening of football, food, and fun. Jill Lynn had made plans to join her mother and sister Jenna at their house to watch the game. Both sisters were Denver Broncos fans, so they weren't particularly invested in either team playing, but it was tradition. It was family time. But Jill Lynn never showed up. At first, Joanne Browning wasn't too concerned. Her daughter was independent, working multiple jobs and studying. Maybe she had to work late. Maybe she had homework. Maybe she simply decided to watch the game elsewhere. The calls started going unanswered, then unreturned. By the next morning, when Joanne called Jill Lynn's workplace and discovered she hadn't shown up for her shift, maternal instinct kicked in. Something was wrong. Joanne picked up Jenna, and together they made the drive to 600 James Street. They had keys to the secure building. They had keys to the apartment. What they didn't have was any preparation for what they were about to find. If you're feeling that knot in your stomach right now, that dread of what's coming next, make sure you're subscribed, because cases like this remind us why we can never stop fighting for justice, no matter how much time passes. Joanne Browning pushed open the door to her daughter's apartment and immediately knew her worst fears had come true. There, on the futon, was Jill Lynn. Multiple stab wounds, a cut to her neck. The weapon? Her own kitchen knife. The scene was devastating, but what made it even more haunting was what wasn't there. Very little evidence. Very few clues. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only questions and a grief that would consume a family. Police responded immediately. The investigation began instantly, and what they discovered would shape the next 24 years of frustration, false leads, and a case file that would grow to become one of the largest in Syracuse Police Department history. The medical examiner determined that Jill Lynn had been dead for some time before her mother discovered her body. The killer had struck sometime on January 28th, while the rest of America was focused on the Super Bowl. But here's what investigators found particularly significant. There was no sign of forced entry, no sign of robbery. Nothing was taken from the apartment. This wasn't a random break-in gone wrong. This was personal. Detective Chris DeJoseph, who would later join the cold case squad, believed from the beginning that Jill Lynn knew her killer. The evidence suggested she had invited this person into her apartment, trusted them enough to let them inside her secure building, up to her sixth-floor sanctuary. And that trust cost her everything. The investigation that followed would consume the Syracuse Police Department for decades. But what they discovered in those first crucial hours would set the tone for everything that came next. The crime scene told a story of betrayal. Someone Jill Lynn trusted had turned that trust into a weapon more deadly than the kitchen knife they used to end her life. Think about this for a moment. You're 18 years old, living independently for the first time. You've worked hard to afford your own place, your own space, your own life. The people you allow into that space are people you trust implicitly. Friends, family, maybe someone you're dating. One of those people killed Jill Lynn Udo. The investigation began with the basics. Who were the last people to see Jill Lynn alive? Who had access to her building? Who knew her routine, her schedule, her plans for Super Bowl Sunday? Detective Chris DeJoseph, who was a patrolman at the time of the murder, recalls hearing about the case throughout the department. By later that year, he would be promoted to detective, and eventually he would become one of the lead investigators on Jill Lynn's case as part of the cold case squad. "We're still hopeful something can be done," DeJoseph said in a 2020 interview, nearly 2 decades after the murder. Jill Lynn, like the other unresolved victims and their families, meant a lot to the detectives. A lot of good work has gone into it. But good work wasn't enough. The leads that seemed promising led nowhere. The suspects that seemed viable had alibis. The evidence that seemed conclusive wasn't conclusive enough. Meanwhile, Joanne Browning was living every parent's worst nightmare. Not only had she lost her daughter in the most violent way imaginable, but she was watching her daughter's killer walk free every single day. The grief transformed into something else entirely. Joanne became a one-woman army in the fight for justice. She quit her job, going out on stress-related disability, and dedicated every waking moment to finding her daughter's killer. She put up flyers throughout Syracuse. She erected not 1, but 2 billboards asking for information about Jill Lynn's murder. She created a reward fund, offering $13,000 to anyone who could provide information leading to the conviction of her daughter's killer. She built a website. She gave interviews to local media. She appeared on national television shows including The Sally Jessy Raphael Show and The Montel Williams Show. Joanne Browning refused to let the world forget about Jill Lynn Udo. But here's what makes this case even more tragic. The murder of Jill Lynn came after the deaths of Browning's father in 1999 and mother in 2000. This family had already been through tremendous loss, and now they were facing the unthinkable. As the months turned into years, the case began to take on the characteristics that define every cold case. The initial burst of investigation energy gave way to periodic reviews. The daily focus shifted to newer crimes, newer leads, newer hopes for justice. But the Syracuse Police Department never gave up. Even as the case grew cold, detectives continued to work it. They conducted countless interviews. They followed up on every tip, every lead, every possibility. By 2016, 15 years after the murder, the case file had grown to become one of the largest the Syracuse Police Department had ever assembled. Think about that for a moment. 15 years of investigation, interviews, evidence collection, and follow-up, and still no arrest. That's when police made an announcement that would give the family new hope. They had DNA evidence, and they believed that DNA evidence could help them build a suspect profile. This was significant. DNA technology had advanced considerably since 2001. What might have been inconclusive or unusable in 2001 could potentially provide the breakthrough they needed in 2016. Detective Chris DeJoseph explained that there were still suspects being looked at and surveilled by investigators as of 2016. The case was far from forgotten, far from abandoned. But for Joanne Browning, time was running out. The years of fighting for justice, of carrying the weight of her daughter's unsolved murder, of never knowing if the killer might strike again, had taken its toll. The stress, the grief, The constant battle against a system that seemed unable to deliver justice was destroying her. If you're thinking about how you would handle this kind of loss, this kind of injustice, hit that like button. Because what happened to this family could happen to any of us, and their fight for justice deserves our support. In 2007, 6 years after her daughter's murder, Joanne Browning died at University Hospital. She died without answers. She died without justice. She died without ever knowing who killed her daughter. Jenna Uto, Jill Lynn's sister, would later tell reporters that her mother died that day in 2001 too. The murder didn't just take Jill Lynn's life, it took Joanne's as well. Think about this for a moment. Jenna Uto has now lived more than half her life as the sister of a murder victim. She was 17 when Jill Lynn was killed. She's now in her 40s. More of her life has been defined by this unsolved murder than by the time she had with her sister. But the investigation didn't die with Joanne Browning. In 2020, nearly 2 decades after the murder, Detective Chris DeJoseph gave an interview where he made it clear that the Syracuse Police Department was not giving up. "We're still hopeful something can be done," he said. "The smallest detail, even something you may think is inconsequential, could help." This brings us to where the case stands today, in 2025. 24 years have passed since Jill Lynn Uto was murdered in her Syracuse apartment. 24 years of investigation, of hope, of disappointment, of leads that went nowhere, and suspects who couldn't be charged. But here's what many people don't realize about this case. It's not just another cold case sitting in a file cabinet somewhere. This is an active investigation. The Syracuse Police Cold Case Squad continues to work on it. They continue to follow up on leads. They continue to hope that someone, somewhere, will come forward with the information that finally brings justice for Jill Lynn. The case is listed on the Syracuse Police Department's website. Under Suspect, it simply says Unknown. But that doesn't mean they've given up. It means they're still looking. And here's something that might surprise you. According to recent reports, there are 80 cold cases in the city of Syracuse that police haven't been able to solve. Most of these cases involve seemingly random shootings. But Jill Lynn's case is different. This wasn't random. This was personal. What makes the Jill Lynn Uto case so haunting isn't just the violence of the crime or the length of time it's remained unsolved. It's the questions that continue to echo through the corridors of the Syracuse Police Department and the hearts of everyone who knew her. Who did Jill Lynn trust enough to let into her apartment that night? Who knew her well enough to know she would be alone on Super Bowl Sunday? Who had access to her secure building? Who was close enough to her to know where she kept her kitchen knives? These aren't random questions. These are the questions that have driven investigators for nearly a quarter century. Dr. Mary Jumbulik, who was involved in the early investigation, recalled in a recent interview that there was initial hope the case would be solved quickly. "There was hope early on that it would be possible to solve this," she said. "But certainly within a day or two when nothing was coming to light, it starts to feel less hopeful." But hope, even diminished hope, never completely disappeared. In recent years, the case has gained renewed attention. True crime podcasts have featured Jill Lynn's story. Television documentaries have examined the evidence. Social media has helped spread awareness of the case to a new generation of potential witnesses. And there's something else that's changed since 2001. DNA technology has advanced exponentially. What couldn't be analyzed in 2001 might be conclusive today. What was inconclusive in 2016 might be definitive in 2025. The Syracuse Police Department has made it clear that they're willing to use every tool available to them. They've worked with the FBI. They've utilized the latest forensic technology. They've re-interviewed witnesses and re-examined evidence. But they need something more. They need someone to come forward. They need someone who has been carrying this secret for 24 years to finally find the courage to speak up. Think about this. If you killed someone in 2001, you've been living with that secret for nearly a quarter century. You've watched the victim's family suffer. You've seen the mother die without answers. You've observed the sister live more than half her life in the shadow of your crime. You've gotten older. Maybe you've had children of your own. Maybe you've experienced loss yourself. Maybe your perspective on life, on justice, on what's right and wrong has changed. Maybe it's time to finally do the right thing. But it's not just the killer who might have information. Think about everyone else who was in Jill Lynn's orbit in January 2001. Her co-workers, her friends, her neighbors, people she had dated, people she had rejected, people who had access to her building, people who knew her routine. Someone saw something, someone heard something, someone knows something. The challenge with cold cases like this is that memories fade. People move away, people die. Evidence degrades, witnesses become less reliable. But sometimes, just sometimes, time works in favor of justice. Sometimes people who were protecting someone in 2001 are no longer willing to protect them in 2025. Sometimes people who are afraid to speak up then find the courage to speak up now. And here's what's particularly interesting about recent developments in the case. While the Syracuse Police Department has been careful not to reveal specific details about their investigation, they've made it clear that they believe the killer is still alive and still in the area. That means someone reading this, someone watching this, someone living in Syracuse or the surrounding area might know Jill Lynn's killer personally. You might work with them. You might live next to them. You might be related to them. This isn't ancient history. This isn't a case from the 1970s or 1980s where everyone involved has died or moved on. This is a case from 2001 involving people who are very likely still alive, still in the area, still carrying this secret. Bonnie Driscoll understands this better than most. She's the mother of another Syracuse murder victim, Lacey Ferguson, whose case went cold for 13 years. Driscoll met Joanne Browning when both mothers were fighting for justice for their daughters. "I loved her," Driscoll said about Browning. "She worked so hard trying to get her daughter's case solved." But Driscoll's story has a different ending. After 13 years, police finally found the man who killed her daughter. He's now serving 61 years plus 2 additional life sentences. "The fact that I know that he's locked up and he can't do this to others is what makes me feel better," Driscoll said. "That's what the Udo family deserves. That's what Jill Lynn deserves. That's what the community deserves. If this case has affected you, if you believe in justice, if you think 24 years is too long for a family to wait for answers, then subscribe to this channel and share this video. Because the more people who know about Jill Lynn Udo, the greater the chance that someone will finally come forward with the information that solves this case." The Syracuse Police Department continues to investigate. The cold case squad continues to work. The family continues to hope, but they need your help. If you have any information about the murder of Jill Lynn Udo, contact the Syracuse Police Department Cold Case Squad at 315-442-5234 or email them at coldcasesquad@syracusepolice.org. Tips can remain confidential. Remember, this isn't just about one family's tragedy. Cold cases like this affect entire communities. They represent failures of justice that diminish all of us. They remind us that evil sometimes goes unpunished, that good people sometimes suffer without relief, that the system we depend on for safety and justice is imperfect. But they also remind us that justice delayed is not necessarily justice denied, that families like the Udos never give up hope, that investigators like Detective Chris DeJoseph never stop working, that communities like Syracuse never stop caring. Jill Lynn Udo was 18 years old when she was murdered. She would be 43 today. She might have become the paramedic she dreamed of being. She might have saved lives, helped people, made a difference in the world. Instead, she became a victim. But she doesn't have to remain a victim without justice. Someone, somewhere, knows what happened on January 28, 2001. Someone knows who killed Jill Lynn Udo. Someone has been carrying this secret for 24 years. It's time to finally tell the truth. It's time to finally give this family the justice they deserve. It's time to finally let Jill Lynn Udo rest in peace. The Syracuse Police Department is waiting for your call. The Udo family is waiting for answers. Justice is waiting to be served. Don't let them wait any longer. That completes the entire script, divided into 6 parts of approximately 3,500 characters each, with every word and character preserved exactly as in the original.